Gotcha. Did you
Not
get a
knowing.
haircut?
I did.
Looks good, man.
Thank you. And I took a shower. Normally,
Oh.
normally I don't do that. Now,
Oh, gotcha.
I
Yeah,
typically I
they're
shower before
overrated.
bed, but it's just been kind of a long couple 95-degree days, so I hit
Gotcha.
it earlier today. So normally, yeah, by the time I wake up in the morning, it's all like fucking everywhere. But
Gotcha.
you know, you
So
catch me pre-bed, post-shower for once.
on that note, so like you're a pre-bed shower guy, so no shower in the morning.
No, yeah. I like to go to bed clean. I like to
Mm.
like just get in the covers and feel clean.
See, but here, this is my challenge because I understand that thought, but I also want to be clean when I go to work. So why only shower once?
Just do it both times.
Yeah. Shower when you get up, shower before you go to bed. Like I don't
You do
understand.
that?
Yeah, I shower
That's
twice a
wild.
day, pretty much every day, and I don't understand
No.
what the problem is. Why is that such a big deal? Like
Well,
I don't want to feel
there's
go ahead.
there's layers to it. Yeah, I get you. I hear you. That's beautiful, dude. Maybe I'll
Like
wake up tomorrow and take a shower, but
I wanna wake up and not feel gross when I go to work, and the shower helps me wake up. But
yeah,
also when I get off work, I don't want to feel sweaty when I go to bed. And everyone's like, "Oh, so that's why you have to shower before you go to bed." Just do fucking both. I've never
that's an
understood the
no.
dilemma. Like,
You're blowing my mind, dude. I would never do that.
I took a Lisa on your heart. I took a Lisa on your heart. Can I Lisa, Lisa Bud? Can I Lisa, Lisa Bud? Can I Lisa, Lisa Bud?
welcome back, everybody. We are Rough Draft Research. You are the audience, and together we are on a quest for Dynasty Domination. How's it going over there, Daniel?
Pretty good, I'm hearing now that the NFL is
Yeah,
actively playing a
active.
Canton,
We're here.
Ohio game.
We're
So,
here. Not another week without some sort of football until February, which
yeah,
you
sounds
know,
sweet when you say it like that.
yeah, it does. It sounds a lot cooler than it actually is, given that the Hall of Fame game was suspended and nobody we care about played. But it's
Yeah.
still a cool thing to say, and we are very excited about it. In just a few weeks, we're going to be getting started with the 2024 NFL season, and I mean that's what we're all here for. That's why we do this podcast all year. That's why we pay so much money for fantasy buy-ins. That's why we drown in fantasy content that doesn't matter in the summer. We're almost there, and it's a great time to be a fan because it's all excitement. No one's disappointed yet, and this is the period that we all love secretly.
Mm,
The
your
thinking,
optimism, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Thinking that your team is going to be the best and thinking that all the players you think are going to be awesome are actually going to be awesome. It's a fun time as fantasy fans.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, like I hit in my notes later, especially in one of these squads, it's like let's just pretend that everyone plays every game, no big deal. That's where we're at. It's until it doesn't happen, which hasn't happened.
Yeah,
Everyone
no,
played every
absolutely.
snap. It was awesome.
Yeah. And that is our perfect best case scenario fantasy world. And I think I might know the team you're talking
I bet you do.
about.
I bet you do.
Well, actually, there might be two.
It could go either
There's
way.
two.
Yeah.
Either way, we're gonna hit you. We have just two divisions left for our divisional wrap up. If you have been with us, you know we're covering all these skill positions for these divisions, and so we're just gonna crack right into it, and we're gonna hit you. Today is the AFC North, one of the best divisions in football, I would argue. And
Certainly has been.
I am gonna get us started with the Cleveland Browns, which definitely could be one of the teams that you were referencing earlier in terms of injuries, because have quite a few of them, and we're going to get into some of it because there are two giant questions hanging over the Cleveland Browns. The first, can Nick Chubb return from injury and be the guy that he is? And the second, is Deshaun Watson any good at football anymore? Um,
Mm.
so we'll get into the first one because I think weirdly it's the easier question of the two to answer. So it's not super easy to answer because even if Nick Chubb is healthy, I think he's going to need a bit of a ramp up period to really get going and really get started. There's even a chance that he's going to lose some of his normal time to Jerome Ford regardless, just with the Browns wanting to kind of protect him and Ford being really good last season. So now you kind of have the Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb situation that you had a couple years ago, um, but now you're trying to kind of make sure that Nick Chubb is the guy. So I think even if he is ready to go, he maybe won't be ready to go. If that makes sense, like I think you could maybe not see him getting 30 carries a game or whatever crazy numbers that he's used to getting. So if he's healthy, he's still a risky RB1 with these knee injuries taking, they usually take a while. Like even if guys can come back and play, they're usually not quite the guy they were until about a year after that knee injury. Um, so if Chubb is healthy, he's a risky RB1. But if he's not, then we're all sleeping way too much on Jerome Ford. Because Jerome Ford is going far too late in drafts for a guy that finishes the RB 16 last year and now might be starting the season. He had 204 carries last season, 4 yards per carry, and 63 targets on top of that. That's a healthy workload um that Ford turned into 1,100 all-purpose yards and 9 touchdowns. So like even if Nick Chubb doesn't play, if Ford is the starter in Cleveland, he's a viable starter. Like he is a guy that you can absolutely play and really get something out of him. I mean, I think he's closer to a Kareem Hunt than he ever will be a Nick Chubb in terms of production, but like he's still very, very useful. It's worth noting, and this is kind of why I talked about the injuries at the top of the Cleveland Browns. Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin are both starting on the PUP list, which is just not good from a team that is built around the offensive line to have your two tackles out and two great tackles be out. So that's going to be a contributing factor in this running game as well. But Ford and Chubb should be viable this year. Chubb completely determinant on injuries, and then if Chubb can't go, then Ford is a guy that is going to potentially win some leagues this year just for how late he's going and how productive he can be. Moving on to the second question, is Deshaun Watson any good anymore? I'd say the jury's pretty out on that question. He's had 12 games as the Cleveland Brown, which not a great amount of games to have with all the turmoil and everything that we've dealt with Deshaun Watson as a Cleveland Brown. For him to only have played 12 games, not a good sign. 58.9% completions, not a great number. 2,200 yards, not great. That's 185 yards per game. 14 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. So just not like what you were expecting to see out of him. And then as a Houston Texan, he has over 400 yards a season as a starter rushing on the ground as a quarterback. Through 2 seasons with Cleveland, he's had 317 total. Now I will say that's 26 yards per game, which is it's fairly close to what he was getting per game in Houston. It is a little bit less, but not by that much. So it sounds like a lot worse than it actually is, but it's still a pretty big drop. It's like 4 or 5 yards in terms of dropping. Um, so I don't know, man. I'm not a big Watson believer at this point. I There's a lot that goes into that, and I'm not going to get into the backward semantics of all that. But I don't know. I don't know that he is the guy, but here's the thing is that the Browns for once brought in a pretty intriguing backup in Jameis Winston, who we have seen make wide receivers fantasy viable before. Like even if he's not a NFL caliber starting quarterback, he at least can make your guys viable in the receiving game. So this for once, if Deshaun Watson sucks and they pull him or gets hurt again, at least you have a guy that can at least push the ball downfield and get some of these receivers some work out of the passing game. Speaking of that, we can get into the receiving game of the Cleveland Browns. I mean, Amari Cooper was great last year, perennially underrated
Mm.
and just completely dominant. I mean, over 17 yards per catch last season, 1,250 yards on 72 catches. One would imagine the passing attempts are going to increase this season with a full season of like a competent quarterback. Obviously, Watson has to be healthy, but that's what they did with Joe Flacco at the end of the year was they threw a lot more and because they were actually getting work out of the passing game that made sense. The secondary wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns, oh, is almost the like NFL award for what could have been when you got Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy fighting for that wide receiver two spot.
Some retreads.
Right? Those are some guys that I know not just us, but a lot of people were very in on coming
Oh
out of
yeah.
college. And so, you look at this team, and Elijah Moore got 104 targets last season as the wide receiver, too. So there is room for a viable wide receiver, too, in Cleveland. Like there really is in terms of opportunity. And honestly, man, I'm willing to give Judy one more chance if I already have him. If I already have
Yeah.
him, I'm
Yeah.
not going out and trying to trade for him. I'm not trying to like salvage Jerry Judy's career or anything. If you already have Judy, just hold on to him. You're not going to get the value that you want out of him. And right now, there's a chance that he could be a decent wide receiver too in this offense. Um, the reason being he was 70th, 770th in catchable target percentage last year,
Oof.
which is just not great. And so, like, okay, let's move him into an offense where, like, A, he's not even the guy, which he didn't need to be the guy in Denver either with Cortland Sutton, but people wanted him to be that guy. And now he's been traded. He's not meant to be the number one wide receiver. That's what Cooper's there for. So now you kind of place him in that wide receiver two role where he can kind of be potentially more effective when the offense isn't focused entirely on him. But if you take a look at Elijah Moore, he was also 76th in catchable target rate last year. So it's not like he was getting a ton of great card targets, even on that 104 that he got. So I think ultimately the wide receiver two in Cleveland is a super risky play, no matter which way you go about it. But there is some decent upside there. Like I really do. I mean, 104 targets is not something to turn your nose up against. If you need a guy that is going to be your third, fourth, fifth wide receiver on your depth chart, the wide receiver two in Cleveland could very easily be that guy. And and again, it goes back to the fact that I think they're going to pass more. With Joe Flacco, they were averaging 41 passes a game compared to 35 with all their other QBs last season, which doesn't sound like a lot. But again, you're talking about six average passes more a game. Like that's pretty significant when you're talking about averages. So I feel like there are gonna be opportunities for these guys to kind of come alive if the offense is moving the way it needs or the way they want it to be. And then I've gone this whole rant about the Browns without talking about David Njoku, and that's because like I don't think much is going to change. Like he got 123 targets last year and he went and produced off of that career highs in catches, yards, and touchdowns. So I don't know why the Browns would change his percentage of targets. Like maybe it decreases slightly to like 110 or 115, but I don't see why he wouldn't have that same exact role going forward because they finally gave him that dominant tight end role and he produced. Now, is he in line to fight for the tight end one? No, he's not. He's not. I'm sorry. I don't think
What?
he can. But is he a guy that can be a tight end 6 to 9? Absolutely. 100%, just like he was last year, and I think he could be again this year. It all again, it ties back to Nick Chubb and the running game, and it ties back to Deshaun Watson and being able to actually throw the ball. But again, the Browns, they either made the playoffs or were right outside the playoffs with this roster, and they just need competent QB play to be a really competitive team in the AFC North to me.
Yeah, that's gonna be a toughie. They made the playoffs. There was
Mhm. Okay, so they did, yeah.
yeah, they were 11-6. Pretty good year, man. Who knew? That Flacco resurgence was like
Oh
that was
yeah,
next
Flacco
level,
because he
man.
played Stroud. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I knew they
It was
did.
it was wild. That was dude, that was some great football. The AFC North did not disappoint in like at all last year. Incredible stuff. But yeah, nobody knows what Watson is, right? I mean,
Mm.
he played like 5 full games and he was a top 10 QB in 3 of them, So maybe there's some potential there, but there's not enough sample size. There's not enough anything. Like we all know, as a Chiefs fan, like we never wanted to run into Sean, in January. Like he did some crazy stuff. He was a one-man wrecking crew. And the thought of him being that guy again doesn't really seem like it's in the realm of possibilities. But is he like 70% that guy, which is still a pretty decent NFL quarterback? Or is he like
20%.
please, Jameis Winston is the
Yeah.
dude now? Because yeah, I mean, fireworks in the sky all day. Winston can get it done. No big deal. You can throw 6 picks a game when you got that kind of defense backing you up. So no big
True.
deal.
True.
So we'll see. But yeah, if Chubb being healthy will be cool. Ford, I mean, he's really setting himself up to be a bit of the future of that room. So that's kind of fun. And I mean, yeah, you can't say enough about Njoku and Cooper. I do want to keep my hopes up for Elijah Moore. I mean,
Mm.
with that workload, he didn't overperform, but he was still fairly reliable for them. So I'm hoping that he can edge out some of that Jerry Judy action. He just needs to get his catch numbers up, man. There's
Well,
like
yeah, I was about to
abysmal.
say 59 catches on 104 targets is not great, but I
Yeah.
also already mentioned that he was 76th in catchable target rate. So it's like it's one of those weird situations where like, is it him? Is he not catching enough, or the pass is just not good enough? But I do like Cooper and Judy being those dominant outside roles. You can really put more where he really should succeed in the NFL,
Hmm.
which is that dominant slot role. Like he needs to be 85% of his snaps in the slot, in my opinion. And now he can be because you have a Cooper and a Judy on the outside.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if he's locked in as that super slot and then there's some consistent quarterback play, could happen where, they don't have to lean on Chubb so heavily because that would be, I mean, 4 dynamic pass catchers. Who knows? All right, whatever, Cleveland. Back off, simmer down. I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on to some real good football players here. I'm telling you, the AFC North Division champions from last year in the Baltimore Ravens.
hmm
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I don't know. Baltimore Ravens, a lot to say here, a little bit to be excited about. Kind of more of the same. Who knows? But you got your guy, Lamar Jackson. I think you guys have all heard of him.
Oh
He's
yeah.
pretty solid. He was the quarterback for
He's all
last
right.
year. Yeah, he's decent. Um, and it was a good year for Lamar. Quarterback four is kind of funny. As far as that number goes, he was the QB1 in 2019. and it kind of seems like he's a different guy now. And the floor is still high, but the ceiling doesn't feel like it's as high as it used to feel. But that's cool. He'll work it out. I'm not too scared about him. But he's coming off career highs for attempts, yards, and completions last season. So that's pretty great, man. I mean, good for him. I mean, is he dual threat now? I mean, what does this mean? Like that's pretty impressive, right? Career highs is something to get excited about, but we're looking that's south of 3,700 passing yards and only 24 touchdowns. So it's great for him to have career highs in pass attempts, but it doesn't make me too stoked when it's the 30th highest pass attempts in the entire league.
Mm.
So that's cool because we know what this game is. It's number one in rush attempts, number one in rush yards and fourth in scoring. So what they're doing works. It doesn't necessarily need to be through the air, but it's good to see him increasing, in Todd Monken's first year in the passing world. So I'll get behind that. But yeah, Lamar, dude, what are you gonna say about him when it comes to fantasy? A lot of these guys I talk about, like the number of single digit games they had as a quarterback. And Lamar, like, that's not really an issue. He had two of them last year, which were his only two as a full-time starter. You know what I mean? Like, if he's not injured or a rookie, kind of getting spot plays, he's getting you double digits. He's pretty incredible, extremely consistent, and last year, I mean, it really hit pretty hard. He had 10 of his games were top 10, and six of them were top five, with only six
Damn.
being outside the top 10. So I like it. I'm saying, like, at 27, I don't see him slowing down at all. He's coming off that 800-yard season, almost 150 carries, and and I think he hasn't had a full season the past 2 years, and then last year he came back and was a QB4. So he is what he is. I think the floor for him is like 1,000+ rushing yards, fully healthy. So I look for that to come up. Um, Now we're gonna see what happens when Derrick Henry enters the room, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. He's extremely reliable, and we'll see what happens. I mean, who knows where he would have got on the TD numbers if Mark Andrews had been healthy all year. I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm not going to get too wild into it, but yeah, as I mentioned, Gus Edwards is gone. He's no longer around here, so we have Derrick Henry, man, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say about Derrick Henry. It's kind of he's a polarizing guy because he's 30 and he is King Henry, and we've all been talking about that cliff that he's fallen off of, that seemingly hasn't really snuck up upon him yet. He was the running back 8 last year, which is kind of a wild number. I don't think we remember him as being that successful, especially splitting the workload in Tennessee. But you know, we got to get him back to greatness. I think that it's possible. He posted his lowest numbers per carry as far as yardage at 4.17 last year. And I mean, that's his lowest, but it was still 23rd among all running backs with over 100 carries. So I'll take that as long as his touchdowns and yardage were still top 10, which they were. So we'll take that all the way. Baltimore as a team had 69 running back red zone attempts. That's insane. If you include Lamar, it's 99 red zone attempts. It's unheard of. Whereas Tennessee last year had 45 for the running backs.
Damn.
So the opportunities for him to score are kind of out of this world. So I don't know if there's really much concern. I'm telling you, the doubters should be a little scared because his old rushing TD record of 16 touchdowns, I think that he's gonna break it. Might have been 17, but I'd say 17 plus this year.
Okay.
We saw what happened with Gus Edwards. He had 13 touchdowns. That was pretty incredible. There's nothing to stop Derrick Henry from just destroying. If he gets anywhere near 50 to 60 red zone opportunities, he's gonna score 20 touchdowns, and I'm scared to see what happens. I think between the 20s, it could be a different story. Um, that you saved your Derrick Henrys for when you need your Derrick Henrys, and you've got Keaton Mitchell. So it's obviously he's coming back from the ACL, but this dude is a home run laser. He's the poor man's Devon A chain, and when he was heavy, man, he was killing it. He seriously had 8.4 yards per attempt last year and 5.7 yards after contact per attempt with 15 missed tackles forced on only 47 attempts. So I'm telling you, he's a lethal weapon. It is gonna happen. I think that the comeback, the start of the season might be a little slow, a little delayed, but he's gonna get back up to speed, and he's just gonna be jumping these guys between Lamar scrambling and Keaton Mitchell. Derrick Henry's gonna be fresh, dude. He's gonna be able to go in there and grind and pound out some touchdowns, dude. I think he's gonna eat it. I was looking at the betting numbers, and it's getting pretty juicy over here. So Derrick Henry, don't fail me now, man. I mean, I get it, but just one more year. That's all I'm asking. Um, but as far as one more year goes, we got the wide receiver room. We got to talk about the pass catchers in this in this location. And hear me out. I've got to tell you, Zay Flowers, dude, beautiful, beautiful rookie year. I got to tell you, that was incredible what you did. 22% target share, you know? That would be cool if you were on like a top 10 passing offense. You give it like 140 targets or something, but his squad is bottom three. So that was 108 targets. And that's third amongst the rookies, tied with Jordan Addison last year. So Puka Nacua and Rashee Rice obviously leaving him in the dust. But I gotta tell you, it's just hard for me to get super jacked about Flowers, considering that Mark Andrews was only out there for 10 games. So I want to see him continue on this success, but I know that target number of 108, that's fewer than Andrews was getting in full healthy seasons. So I'm wondering where that workload is coming from, especially like this. I'm telling you, this running game, it almost profiles as being more dynamic than the past. With Derrick Henry in there, this is insane. But I'm in it. I'm in it for you, Mr. Flowers. 5 touchdowns was robbery, and I think he can definitely build on that number. The real issue, though, I mean, Mark Andrews, Mark Andrews, Mark Andrews, right? I'll just keep saying his name. He's about 50, 60 targets shy of where he normally would be because he was injured last year with only 61 targets. And, you got Odell no longer on the squad. That's 64 targets. So I'm looking at a team where the number one guy was just over 100 targets, and the number two and the number three guy were just over 60 targets. It's just not a lot happening here. Um, so yeah, that's fine. I think there's a space for Zay Flowers to keep it alive. He was the wide receiver 31 though, so give me something better than that to be excited about. Baltimore pass catchers just not really hitting me, and I know because I've been there. I've been through it. I'm a Rashad Bateman guy. You know what I mean? I have been from the start. I got the t-shirt. I got the Golden Gophers Rashad shirt, and it's not aging well, man. It's just not doing it for me. He's coming off of a pretty decent year for him, considering he's the wide receiver 85. He was 69 in 2021. So these are kind of the best you can hope for the guy, but over 50 targets. And they say he's coming into stride, you know what I mean? He's probably going to get 70 targets with that OBJ out of town. I just don't know. Like Todd Monken, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm so sad. It breaks my heart. I'm not talking about Rashad Bateman anymore. All right. So it's over. All this to say, like, Tez Walker, bro, like, there's nothing here for you, man.
Hmm.
Like, just hope that you get, a nice place in your fifth season as a pro to play football. I'm sorry, dude. I'm Tez walking away from this one. But I said everything I need to say about Mark Andrews, didn't I? The
Yeah.
dude was tight end 15 with only 10 games. Yeah, and he's 3 targets away from being the second highest targeted Raven in only 10 games. It's ridiculous.
Absurd.
He's averaging 6.5 targets per game. And that's crazy. The past 3 years, it's closer to 8 targets per game. Like he is the man. He's the dude. I think like he's top six tight end day in and day out. Just got to keep him on the field
Yeah.
and keep him going, man. And I'm telling you, this is even with the shortened season. The last player to lead the Ravens in red zone targets that was not named Mark Andrews was John Brown in
Oof.
2018. So, I love it. Get excited about everybody on this team, but like it's all Mark Andrews. It's gonna happen. Isaiah Likely definitely did great. Definitely held down some stuff in the last part of the season, but it's just not there's not enough bread to go around, man. These sandwiches are open faced, and no one is gonna get filled up, man. Everyone's gonna be hungry in this beast. I'm telling you.
I can see that. That's kind of the always the issue with Lamar Jackson offenses, right? Is that there's a lot of talent, but they're not going to see a lot of opportunity. And so really you have room for two pass catchers and one of them being Mark Andrews and being the dominant guy, and then take your pick at wide receiver. I really do think Zay Flowers can take another step. And I think a dominant running game and the emergence of a wide receiver too, like a Rashad Bateman, could help him out. But at the same time, as much as I love Zay Flowers and as much as I really do think those two things could help him out, those two things the only way they're going to help him out is if they also pull from his opportunities. You know what I mean? Because like for them to actually help him at all, they have to be consistent and they have to be effective. And Derrick Henry obviously is going to be. I'm sorry, if you're trying as a middle linebacker to defend the option route or the option run against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, who do you pick? Who do you pick? Who do you pick each play? Every play, who do you pick? And obviously, it's reading the play. It's all this stuff that they're way better at
Stick with
doing,
Lamar, dude.
I guess. But like now you have Derrick Henry's, and even if you pick, oh, I'm gonna stop Derrick Henry, there's a decent chance that even if you want to, you're not gonna stop
Right,
Derrick Henry. So like this offense should be a lot more effective on the ground, which is crazy because they were so effective on the ground
right,
already. And so now you're adding in that dynamic. So Zay Flowers targets are going to get smaller. They may get more effective because there's less people on him. There's more attention to the running game. There's more attention to Rashad Bateman if camps camp reports are true about him.
of course they
And
are.
yeah. And so all these things, but long story short, I want the four main pieces of this offense because I think they're going to score a lot of points. I want Lamar, I want Derrick Henry, I want Zay Flowers, and I want Mark Andrews. I don't really want anything after that. I don't want a Keaton Mitchell. I don't want a Rashad Bateman, a Nelson Aguilar, an Isaiah Likely, any of those guys. Not for 2024, at least. But all those top four guys should be in the top. I would say Lamar, Andrews, and Henry should be in the top 10. And then and Flowers, I can project into the top 20-ish,
No
maybe.
way.
But maybe no way. That's what I'm saying.
Where are
Some
you gonna
people
put
aren't
Tank
high on
Dell,
it.
dude? Sorry.
And and so like yeah, and but that's like high end, that's me being really high on him and projecting him into that. He's likely to finish in the 30s like he did last year. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
um I don't know. I like the Ravens. They're probably going to compete really heavily for the AFC Championship, but outside of those top four guys and then that wide receiver spot specifically being a little weak, there's not a lot of fantasy viability out of the Ravens to me, outside of, I mean, when I say not a lot, you're talking a QB, a running back, and a tight end that are going to be very, very top tier. So that's a lot of viability that way. But wide receivers being king in today's NFL, you're not getting a lot of that out of the Ravens, which is a little unfortunate.
For
Um, Moving on to the Pittsburgh
sure.
Steelers, and there has been a lot of change on top of the Steelers, which is not normal. You know, they're the team that went from Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to um fuck, why can't I remember his name? Mike Tomlin. There it is. So three coaches dominating that. So they don't change a lot. But right now, I think there is a lot of change at the top. You know, you got Arthur Smith coming in and replacing Matt Canada, which is lateral, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know, like who knows?
one stop gap filling the old stops gap.
Right. It seems like it's a bigger deal than a lot of people are making it, or it seems like it's less of a big deal than a lot of people are making it. But we're all hoping that Arthur Smith returns to his Tennessee form, where he was a decent offensive coordinator. You know, you got two new QBs in town, which is not something that happens a lot in Pittsburgh. You got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. The upside of Justin Fields is obvious. He's a playmaker, inconsistent for sure, but he has that wow talent that you just can't ignore. I'd also argue that this is the best offensive line that he's ever played behind. It's ranked ninth by PFF in the preseason rankings. Back-to-back picks along the offensive line in the 2024 draft this season. And good ones too. You got Troy Fatanu out of Washington as a first round tackle, and then you've got Zach Frazier out of West Virginia to play center. Adding that to Broderick Jones from last year, I think that's a really strong offensive line if these guys are who we think they are, obviously, which is a huge factor when we're talking about projecting guys forward. So to me, Justin Fields is a super interesting stash, especially in superflex leagues. You never know what's going to happen with him behind that better offensive line. But I also think that Russell Wilson was not as bad as a lot of people want to say he was last year. 26 to 8 touchdown to interception ratio. Fairly efficient, if boring as a passer. You know, he had his lowest yards per attempt of his career. But he actually wasn't that terrible in terms of like moving that offensive along. And if you want to say that it was Denver that kind of led to that, you know, downswing in his production, then you could kind of buy into Pittsburgh kind of bringing another upswing around. Um, but boring is a dangerous line to walk if you have Justin Fields behind you. You know what I mean? Because when you're having less than 10 yards per completion, and then Justin Fields, albeit is throwing an incomplete pass here or there, but is also completing 60-yard passes down the field and running for his goddamn life, it's going to be really hard for you to keep that job. It's a good problem for the Steelers to have, but it's a bad problem in terms of fantasy while still being one of my favorite moves of the offseason by the Steelers to go out and get both these guys to kind of rebuild that room. The wide receiver room, super interesting. However, Roman Wilson's most recent high ankle sprain, or likely high ankle sprain, kind of highlights a massive problem with this room, and that's that it's very, very shallow. This is the Roman Wilson podcast, obviously. So
What are you
we're
doing?
higher on Roman Wilson than a lot of other people, I would say. But if you take him out of the equation, your wide receiver two is Van Jefferson
Yeah, boy.
or Calvin Austin or
Mm,
Scotty Miller, who keeps
Scotty
popping up
time.
randomly. I don't love that. I don't love that behind Pickens. Pickens, a guy who we are expecting to take a leap, but hasn't quite taken that leap. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
so now we're relying on a cacophony of wide receiver three and fours to be a wide receiver two. And again, we're really high on Roman Wilson. I really do think he can be a wide receiver two, but he's also hurt. Um, Pickens is sure to be the leader in targets by a significant margin. However, the most targets by a wide receiver one in an Arthur Smith offense is 117, and that was Drake London in his rookie season 2022. That includes the AJ Brown years where Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator in Tennessee, which means Pickens is still really going to need to increase his efficiency to take the next leap in terms of like I don't think his targets are going to increase that much in an Arthur Smith offense, even being the number one guy, because he was over 100 targets last year. So he's only going to get like 15 to 20 more, which is a good chunk, but it's not a crazy amount. So he's going to have to be really a lot more efficient than a 59.4% catch rate last season, which won't cut it. Now, obviously, the target quality for him should go up, but how far is that going to go up with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? Not two guys at this point in their career known for really putting the ball exactly where it needs to be. And then if we want to talk about guys getting efficient targets, ditto that with Pat Freiermuth. Because Pat Freiermuth is a guy who seems closer to Jonnu Smith than Kyle Pitts in terms of target demand. And if we look at Arthur Smith offenses, he can target the tight end if he wants to, but it's really when it's a super athletic dynamic tight end like Kyle Pitts, he got 110 targets in 2021, but Johnny Smith as Arthur Smith's tight end is getting like 50, you know? So even when he was the starting 10 end, that second target is wide open. And I mean, second target, wide receiver two, tight end two, whatever. It's wide open, especially with with Roman Wilson missing time. So it's really important, I think, to figure out who is going to be that second target leader. But I think it's very hard to figure out who that's going to be outside of Roman Wilson, which is who we really are in on. And legitimately, I think Roman Wilson could have a very similar season to Jaden Reed did last year, where
Ah,
he's coming into an offense where the wide receiver two is wide open. He's being very ignored because he wasn't a high end draft pick. He wasn't this guy that everyone loved coming out. But the opportunities are there because I'm sorry, Roman Wilson right now is better than Van Jefferson and he's better than Calvin Austin and he's better than Scotty Miller. I know you're a big Van Jefferson guy, so that might be blasphemy to you, but I will stand on that hill right now that he's a better player than those three guys. So, if he were to be healthy and get that target share, I think he really could have a productive 700-yard, 7 to 8 touchdown year. And everyone would be like, man, this Roman Wilson guy really is good. And we'll be standing there like, yeah, we fucking
no
told you that
shit, right?
on the first episode of the Roman Wilson podcast. But that's all up in the air now because Roman Wilson got hurt and this offense is still a big question mark. And that's without even talking about the RB room, which we're about to get into, because the
Oh,
RB room could be legitimately one of the most dead even splits we're going to see in the NFL this season. They were pretty even in 2023, 223 opportunities for Jalen Warren as opposed to 293 for Najee Harris. So a 60 opportunity difference. That's including attempts, rushing, and targets. So that's not that far when you're expressing it out over the entire season. Um, Add in the fact that Arthur Smith is kind of notorious for splitting the RB work. You know, you look at 300 touches for Bijan Robinson last year against 209 for Tyler Algier, which seems a little bigger or a little less intense than you would actually think. But the frustration comes from the red zone touches, where Algier actually had more red zone touches than Bijan Robinson by three or two or three, which is just crazy when you're talking about the talent level. So I think those frustrations can continue. this season when you're talking about Jalen Ward and Najee Harris. Because I'm sorry, neither one of those guys scream Derrick Henry red zone touches. And outside of that, no one has gotten a dominant workload for Arthur Smith red zone touches outside of a gentleman named Derrick Henry. And neither one of these guys screamed that to me. So I don't think it makes them irrelevant by any means, but I do think it limits their upside because we've seen the effect that Arthur Smith can have on the running game. In 2022, the Falcons had one of the highest rated run blocking offensive lines in the league. They had one of the highest totals of rushing yards as well as rushing attempts. So we can see where he can make the offense hum, but it just really does limit both these running back ceilings to like an RB2 every week, like borderline RB2, because I just don't think that they're either one going to get the dominant amount of carries in this offense. I think Najee gets more carries than Jalen Warren and more work than Jalen Warren, but I just don't see them being able to really take advantage of that to be more than an RB1 on a week to week basis. Now, could there be weeks where Najee is an RB1? I think so. I really do, with the efficiency that Arthur Smith might bring to the running game. But I just don't think you're going to see that week in and week out of him.
No, no, you really hit home with that Algier carry split conversation there. It makes it feel like I don't know, the hopelessness we felt since Najee's rookie year is permanent, and that the hopefulness that we're hearing with Jalen Warren is like already capped, you know.
Yep.
So that's great. It's probably good for this team to have two
Yeah.
such reliable and awesome ball carriers. But what this is not the Steelers How They Doing podcast. This is the Roman Wilson podcast. And yeah, I remember where I was when I got that Roman Wilson news. I'll never
That's
forget.
sad
I
day.
was driving under the K10 bridge, and it genuinely hurt. It hurt my
Mm.
heart, man, because that was so ripe. You know, we're gonna be like Puka Nakoa, who, you know what I mean? Like, what are we even talking about right now? This is Roman Wilson, full stop. Like, he's the world now. But I hope he gets a bounce back because, yeah, I did like Van Jefferson as a deep threat in an offense that also had Cooper Kupp in it and Matthew Stafford throwing the ball. Like, that was pretty cool. And
Mm.
I'm not into this Van Jefferson that we have here. I mean, hopefully he's awesome because like someone has to do something in this offense, please. Question mark. I don't know if there's any potential for it. The only thing I can think of is, you know, Justin Fields hits the ground running and just smothers George Pickens and targets. And I mean, you know, DJ Moore was the wide receiver 6 last year
Hmm.
off about 140 targets from Fields. Like he caught quite a few of them, which is something that Pickens isn't exactly known for, but it's not a stretch to imagine that possibility as long as we're not like flirting with Russ as the starter and then Fields as the starter or whatever. But I do hats off to Tomlin. He's built in enough fuses into this year that like if something's got to pop, you know, he's got it's like it's not getting back to him. It's like, oh, it's Arthur Smith. He's fired. It was this quarterback situation. You know, we're drafting someone. There's so many outs for him that it's going to come out roses, man. I hope so anyway. I like
That's the
Tomlin a lot.
secret to keeping an NFL job is like having a lot of scapegoats.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you have 30 scapegoats, then they're never going to come at you, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't last, it doesn't work forever, I don't think. I don't know. Maybe it does. We'll find out. But yeah, the Steelers, man. I was hoping that the pain of transition was 2023, but it appears that that was just the beginning. So here we go. As long as, yeah, like you're saying, O-line solid, defense is doing good. So I guess if they can make it work without like chasing the conventional qualities that most other NFL teams are, obsessed with right now, top tier quarterback play and wide receiver play, then good for them. So make it work, make it work. It's a tough division. It's gonna be hard to pull it off. But I think that
For sure.
Bengals
Mm,
probably maybe be able to pull it off, after finishing last in this division last year. I mean, it's kind of funny. There's one of like 12, 9, and 8 teams, but they didn't make the playoffs like the rest of them did. But now there were only 6, 9, and 8 teams, 7, 9, and 8 teams. Um, but yeah, it wasn't enough for the Bengals to make the playoffs, and that's fine. They're going to be just fine because the word is out, baby. Joe Burrow may be having his first healthy offseason in a very long time, and that's great. So I don't know. I think you figured it out, You want to be healthy for the start of the season. All you have to do is just stop playing halfway through the previous season. Boom. It's done. So he's got it down to a science, man. Great plan, Joe. I think he nailed it. But we know, I know, we all know that a healthy Joe Burrow is a fantasy superstar, man. So I want to see that happening. He's an ace at all levels of the field. He always has been. And now he's got his last run with T. Higgins. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure on this team to like get back up the ladder to where they were. When they dropped the Super Bowl game. They need to get back there to prove that it wasn't a fluke. I think they've got all the pieces in place to make that happen. So we just need Joe Burrow, man. 10 fantasy quarterback, fully healthy, make it happen. Throw another 4,500 yards, another 30 plus touchdowns. Just do your old shit. Be healthy. Um, I don't know. I don't know with this team. I'm pretty pumped, but Joe Mixon is gone. So he was the RB6 last year, and he's being replaced with a combination of players that are Zach Moss and Chase Brown. So let's just go ahead and look at what that means. What are they missing? Quite a bit of red zone work. He had 78% of the Bengals red zone rush attempts. That's 56. And that's insane. That's an insane number. I think maybe Joe Burrow's gonna have to rush in the red zone a little bit because Chase Brown is here and he got 4 red zone carries last year. And it was negative 13 yards. So 0 touchdowns. That's not magic, but but you got to look at Zach Moss, and he definitely wasn't third in the red zone carry numbers like Mixon was, but he was tied for 10th, which is not bad for a guy who only had 8 games over 50 snap percentage. So I think that is going to be the way of it. Zach Moss inside the 20s, Chase Brown
sorry.
between the 20s, but it's going to be rough. Moss was the RB31 last year, and I think we all got pretty excited about Chase Brown. We've been excited about him for a while, but he didn't really show out too hard last year. He was doing 4 yards per carry. Moss was like 4.4, which these numbers aren't horrible, but the real thing is like these guys aren't league winners at all. They're not going to be Jalen Warren, Najee Harris level 1-2 punches. Um, what we're looking at is a pair of guys that can possibly get the Bengals by, but they're not going to get you by. I wouldn't really be too excited to count on either of them. Um, and I mean, Joe Mixon left a huge hole in this offense. 257 carries and 64 targets. That's insane. That's 67% of the rush work on a team that was 30th in the league in rush attempts. So you take a huge piece of a underwhelming rush attack and you replace it with these two guys, and I can't really hope for anything substantial. Um, but I do want to highlight a few things about the Mixon workload. This is kind of the whole thing with this offense, right? Because Burrow is back, right? And we know what the wide receiver room is. So the real change is like not having a reliable guy like Mixon in the mix. But he also, as a pass catcher, was pretty stout. He had 13 red zone targets, which was more than T. Higgins. Even though it was a shorter year for him, it was still 17.5% of the red zone pass attack for the Bengals. So I think that there's a pretty good opportunity for that workload to boost the wide receiver room and go directly to them. So I guess I'm looking to the wide receivers just to carry this team pretty much like they always have. Even though Mixon was getting some easy workload off of their huge distraction level. I think that it's going to have to go up again. And Jamar Chase, I don't know. I don't know exactly what to say about him. He was a wide receiver 11 last year. His best year was wide receiver 5, 2021. We all remember that. It was pretty cool, but he's been outside the top 10 the past 2 years, and he's still holding down like the number 3 spot on Keep Trade Cuts single QB rankings. So, I mean, it's time, I guess, to deliver on that if we want to keep going forward, thinking he's the man. But the truth of it is, he only had one touchdown in one top 10 week without Burrow last year. So there's a certain level of risk associated with having this high of a price tag on a QB dependent wide receiver. And I hate to say that he's QB dependent, but we've seen a lot of top tier wideouts do it without top tier quarterbacks, and it doesn't appear to be necessarily going down like that for Jamar. So good luck with him. We just need to see him jump back up to where he was back in 2021. His A dot the past 2 years is down 3 yards, yards after the catch down 3 yards. It's um it's just not exactly happening for him. He's getting buried in workload, and we just need to see the quality of that workload consistent with the healthy Burrow. But 145 targets last year, it's a low number for his career, but I could slightly go up. We'll see what happens. I'm actually more excited about T. Higgins. And I think, obviously he didn't play the full season last year, but between Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd's departures, 27% of the targets from last year are up for grabs. And so that's a big number. And it's actually 27% of the red zone targets available too. So I think that I know you're not the biggest T. Higgins fan, but I think he's going to be well over 100 targets. I think he's going to get more meaningful work in the red zone. That's what they need to do to climb the AFC ladder, man. It's a long way back to where they were before, and I think a tag T Higgins is about to get like pumped up with workload without a long term plan for him to be with the team at this point.
Jeez.
You got to just use him up, and it's going to be decent for the fantasy world. But on the other hand, you've got to look at like rolling the dice with the wide receiver 3. Like we have seriously been into Jermaine Burton for a long time. I know we're hoping for a better, bigger opportunity in the landing spot, but at this point, we're kind of chasing the 2025 wide receiver 2 for Cincinnati. It could be Yoshi Voss. I mean, there's a guy named Trent on this team. So I don't know. I like Burton. I think it's probably not a bad idea to stash one of these guys. I think it's worth the roster spot with a high volume, like say 4,500 yards from Burrow when he's healthy. That's not going anywhere. Um, and then you've got the tight end room, man. And I really do think, I know this is going to sound crazy, but if you're looking at Mike Gesicki, any year he's gotten over 80 targets, he's been a tight end 1. And I think that this is going to be a good year for him. Last year was 114 targets to the tight end room. It was 94 targets to the tight end room prior to that. And I think Gesicki's got a place on this team that can fill the void that Mixon left behind. We talk about running backs and tight ends playing with the same targets. And now that those are up for grabs, I think he could snatch him. We know Brian Callahan no longer OC here, but they promoted from within with Dan Pitchman. So I think that we're going to see some consistency in this offense. Obviously, Taylor's going to keep things rolling the way they've always been. But yeah, Mike Gesicki, dude, tight end one. Here it comes again.
I mean, I would like to hope so because I've been a big Mike Gesicki guy since he came out, but I don't really see it. I'll get into that in a minute. But I think the main point you hit on is Joe Burrow coming back just elevates everybody on this team.
Hmm.
That to an absurd level. I mean, I think Chase can reach top five, our wide receiver potential with Joe Burrow coming back. And I think T. Higgins is a high end our wide receiver too. With Joe Burrow coming back, I'm still not a guy that thinks he's a wide receiver one because he hasn't been um any season he's had, and I don't see that changing with Burrow and Chase being back and healthy. But I'm with you that I think the wide receiver three spot this year in Cincy is very intriguing, especially because you kind of project that to being the wide receiver two spot for the future of the Cincinnati Bengals. So you've got Jermaine Burton and Andre Yosavash, um, who the camp reports for both those guys are really out the world. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of hard to figure out what's going on there. Apparently, they both look really, really good, which makes sense. Jermaine Burton. The only complaints about Jermaine Burton, it was never about talent. I never heard one person coming out of the draft bitch about Jermaine Burton's talent. It was always like these weird off the field issues or character or whatever, all this stuff. And if he is a guy and he is about to be the wide receiver too for the Cincinnati Bengals, then everyone should be jumping all over that. Like just opportunity alone, you should be jumping all over that. And talking about the tight end room, I feel like we get excited every single time a tight end comes to a superstar QB's roster. And I just really think you gotta temper those expectations for Burrow. And Burrow's to I'm sorry, I keep hiccuping. That's why I was muted during Dan's whole conversation. So if you were like, "Oh, why is Christian not commenting on anything Dan's saying?" That's why, because I kept hiccuping and it sounds ridiculous on the
Bulletproof.
on the there it is again. But temper expectations because in Burrow's two fully healthy seasons as a starting quarterback, he targeted the tight end room collectively 15% of the time in both 22 and 2021. So as much as I want to get excited about Matt Gesicki or Drew Sample or even Eric All, who by the way, I think makes this roster over some other of the tight ends on this roster, and I think it's going to be a big deal. But there's just not enough targets going there for me to really get that excited about it in terms of long-term fantasy viability. But the wide receiver room is going to be crazy. He's targeting Joe Burrow targets the wide receivers like most other quarterbacks I don't see. Like he just stays targeting that wide receiver room. So I want any piece that I can. It starts with Chase, it's then Higgins, and then Burton or Yossi Voss, whatever you want to do. Take that dice roll, and I think you should.
All right, man. I'm in it, man. I'm waiting for Chase Brown to take off so we can do the chase thing,
The Chase,
chase
Chase,
squared on
Chase.
this.
Yeah, that's fair. I
So
do love Chase Brown as well. I've been trying to trade for him in a few leagues, and people just don't seem to be in on it. They're not wanting to let go of him, but I
you'll
really
be all
do
right.
think he has a chance to
Yeah,
really take a step. But
it's
apparently Dan disagrees with me. I'm sorry that I keep hiccuping. So we're gonna get out of here before
okay.
I fucking drive you guys crazy with that noise of the hiccuping. But until next time, we've been Rough Draft Research. You've been the audience, and we'll see you next time.
Stay awesome.
I took a lease out on your heart.